I'm thrilled today to interview the author of Selling Value, How to Win More Deals at Higher Prices. As every salesperson knows, that is the key of why we are in selling. And I have the author today. I'm thrilled to have Mark Stiving. Mark is Ph.D. in pricing. He has consulted. He's well known in the industry for dealing with this important topic. He has his own podcasts and certainly has had other books in addition, which I would highly recommend. But I love this book because it's such an important topic, and I can't wait to talk to Mark about it. So, hi, Mark.
Hi, Pat. This is going to be fun.
It is. I know. I'm excited about it because it's a topic, as someone that I'm involved with lead generation and training salespeople to prospect. Obviously, value is a key component of what you are selling. But as I said to you just a few minutes ago, it does seem as if in this year that we should be moving past product sales, and that really hasn't been the case. And the fact of the matter is I want to get your thoughts on why are we still stuck on product selling?
It is such a hard question, but here's the key point is it isn't your industry. It's
Mhm.
every industry does this exact same thing. When you go to look at a website, they're listing features, they're not listing value, or even think of that as benefits.
Mhm.
Everybody's focused on features. Now, if I were to explain why, I think the answer boils down to what's called the curse of knowledge. Those of us who sell a product, regardless of what the product is, we know our product so well that we've forgotten what it's like to not know it. An example I love to use is imagine someone lists off to you a bunch of features from a computer and asks you, hey, is this a good computer? Would you buy it or not? And you have a gut feel, yeah, that's a good one, or no, that's not good. But now imagine your grandfather is about to buy his very first computer. He goes into Best Buy and the salesperson lists off these features. And the grandfather says, I have no idea what you're talking about, right? Can I talk to my grandkids on this? And so the difference is we bought enough computers in our life, we understand computer features that we can translate features into value, but novices can't. And yet we don't realize almost every new customer we talk to is a novice in our industry.
Well, you talk about it, and I think you segment it into experts versus non-experts. And really, I think that's a clever way of actually describing the purpose of typically what a salesperson should be doing. So, talk about this issue that you make the statement that salespeople are really focusing on non-experts.
Well, most salespeople are trying to win new customers. And so,
Mhm.
new customers, imagine the first time you buy anything, you're not an expert. You go online and you try to figure out what is it that matters to you, what's important, how would you make a decision. You're trying to figure out what that whole industry is and even what the decision process is, where value might come from. And we really just don't know the answer to that question. Now, it turns out if you buy something that you've bought over and over and over and over and over again, you really don't need a salesperson. You can
Mhm.
go look at a bunch of specifications and say, yeah, this is the one I want. This is the right price. And so we as companies hire salespeople to go help buyers buy. And the buyers that we're helping aren't experts. They don't know what the value of our products is.
Well, that's really a great point, which leads to my next question, really, that ties together with this whole issue of really why isn't the value well understood, not just at the salesperson's level, but also at management level? It really does start there, that the value component of what they're bringing to market is not understood. Any thoughts on that?
I'm going to have to keep coming back to the curse of knowledge. I don't have a brilliant answer for
Hmm.
why companies don't do this because to me, after studying this for so long, it is so obvious that we have to spend time thinking about our customers and value, and we don't do this. We spend a lot of time crafting new products, crafting new features together to say, here's our new offer. And yet we never step back to truly think about what's the value to the customer. And that just shocks the heck out of me that we don't do this. So I can't give you a great answer other than we just think that if we build the feature, that people are going to buy it.
Yes, I agree. And I see it not only in the financial, and you're exactly right, in a lot of industries for sure. But you also talk about in the book, which I think is really a really important, really comment that you're talking about that salespeople need to have, need to find potential targets that have actually a problem and they recognize that they have a problem instead of obviously working with those that don't even recognize it from the get-go. Talk about that concept.
Yeah, before I talk about that, can I talk about value tables though? Because it's
Sure.
kind of a prerequisite to
Hmm.
answering that question.
Sure.
So value tables is a tool I put together just to say, here's what value means to your customers. And a value table has four basic columns. The first column is the solution. And so I think of that as your product or a feature of your product. It's what we often talk about in sales. It's the things that we do and the features that we offer. If I go to your website, those are probably the things that are on your website. Then we built a solution because it solves a problem for a customer. Can we articulate that problem? I got to say, that's the hardest step that every company I've ever worked with has is
Hmm.
being able to articulate what is the problem that we solve for our customer. Most of the time, I hear the first attempt at a salesperson or a business person trying to answer that is, well, my customers would say, I need fill in the blank with my feature, right? And that's not a problem. We have to truly understand what the problem is. Then once we know that someone has a problem, if they buy our solution, what's a result they might get? When I'm working in the world of B2B, I always think of results as KPIs,
Hmm.
right? What's a number that I can move for my client? And then the last column is value. In B2B, value is measured in incremental profit. In B2C, value is harder to measure. There isn't really a measure for that, but we can still talk to it and say what it is. Now, the reason I brought all that up is because the problem column is a really important column. People only buy from you because you're solving a problem they have.
Hmm.
And so now I want to go prospect. Doesn't it make sense to only prospect for people who have a problem? Because if they don't have a problem, they're not going to buy my product. There's no reason for them to buy my product. And then we could think even beyond that. Wouldn't it be easier if I sold to people who already knew they had a problem and I didn't have to try to convince them they had a problem? And if I take the next step, I would say, well, wouldn't it be easier if I only sold to people who are currently trying to solve that problem? And then the last step I would take is, wouldn't it be even easier if I only sold to people for which that problem was really severe? And those would be the easiest sales to make. So I
So
think of
how,
that as value-based prospecting and different
mhm.
levels at which you would go through and the types of customers you're looking for.
And so then that leads to the question of figuring out who actually has a problem and recognizing that they have a problem. And I do find that salespeople really stumble around with that issue. In the housing industry, everyone makes the generalized assumption that, well, everybody needs a home. Well, okay, that's great. That's true. But how do you go find those that are now actually willing to go to that next step? Any thoughts on that?
Sure, because we haven't articulated a problem yet, right? So the problem isn't I need a home. That's
Hmm.
remember when I said the problem that I hear most often from people when I say articulate your client's problem is
Hmm.
they say I need a feature or I need a solution or a product like yours. And so I need a home isn't a problem, right? So what's the problem? I've been renting and I really want to buy a first starter home so that I can get my life in order and start to build a nest egg, right?
Right.
That feels like a problem to me.
Yes, you're taking it to the next step. You also talk about value propositions, and I often see certainly salespeople getting confused on they think that's value when essentially, to me, it's just a marketing mission statement that companies have when they're really telling people about value props. Talk about that.
Yeah, so I think of a value proposition as a high level value statement that we use because it's relatively common across our markets. We can say these words and we're hoping that it attracts people. But individual buyers, that's not enough. For each individual buyer, they have a very specific set of problems. Can you address what those specific problems are for that buyer? And so the better we understand our problem set, the buyer's problem sets, or I should say the possible problems our buyers may have, then we can understand how is it that we address those. What are the features or capabilities we have that can help our buyers solve problems so that they could achieve results that they're really after.
Well, that leads to this issue, and which I thought was really brilliant, talking about inherent value and relative value. Talk about what that is. Why is that important for individual salespeople?
Yeah, one of my favorite concepts is inherent value versus relative value. Inherent value is what's the value of solving the problem. So what's the value of having a house to live in? Or let me give you
Mhm.
my favorite example is what's the value of having air to breathe? Right. And the answer is infinite. You can have everything I own, right? That it has a lot of value.
Mhm.
And then I live in Reno, Nevada. I just captured some fresh Reno air. Would you like to buy it? And of course not. And so why not? Because you have all the free air around you that you need. And so that's relative value. Air is either worth everything we own because it solves a problem, or it's worth absolutely nothing because there's another solution someplace else that I
Mhm.
could choose from. And when we understand those two different types of value, then what we want to understand is what's going through our buyers' minds. So let me give you an example of when this may make a lot of sense. So I may mess up your industry because I'm not an expert in your industry. My
Sure.
apologies. But but I'm a mortgage broker. And I know that you as a buyer, you're going to go out and look at three different mortgage brokers, and I want to be able to win that business. And so you're not using relative value. I'm talking to my potential client. Here's why I'm the best mortgage broker. These are the things that I do differently than my competition. These are the things that I do better. So then you've selected me. You said, "Hey, Mark, I want you to be my mortgage broker." And I go, "Oh, great, thanks." And then as we start working together, I say, "But wouldn't you like insurance on your payments?" I don't know if that makes sense or not, but I'm just saying it.
Mhm.
Guess what? You're now making a will I decision on the insurance. You're using inherent value, not relative value. You're not going to go say, "Hey, let me go look at those other two mortgage brokers and see what they were offering in insurance." You're just saying, should I buy insurance or not? And so there's a huge opportunity because when people are only making a will I decision, they're not as price sensitive. It doesn't mean that they're not price sensitive at all, but they're not as price sensitive.
So talk about, and this is a part that I think is really fascinating when you're describing the will I decision and the which one decision, which is another way of saying inherent value versus relative value. So talk about what that is, how you would explain that.
Most of the time when we make a purchase decision, we make two different decisions. The first decision we make is will I? So will I buy something in the product category? And then after that, we've said, okay, yes, I'm going to go buy something. Now, which one will I go buy? When we're making the will I decision, price is usually not the very big factor.
Mhm.
As soon as we move to the which one decision, price becomes a really important factor. So we're now shopping for which is the best bang for the buck. Where am I going to get my best investment? And we're always focused on price versus what's the relative value of the things that I'm looking at. Another way to look at that is I look at the more expensive one and I say, is the additional price worth it? So we're always comparing those things. Now sometimes people only make a will I decision. And when people are only making a will I decision, that tells us that they're not as price sensitive. We don't have to focus on price so much. And instead, we really want to focus on inherent value. What's the value of solving the problem that we solve with that product or that feature or that capability that we're selling? Um, so I'll give you a great example that I just thought of. I don't think I have this in the book, but I grew up in Ohio, and when I would buy a new car in Ohio, they would take you to the finance person's office after it was all over with, and they would say, "Would you like undercoating on your car?" Now, guess what? I've already made all the which one decisions there are to make. Now it's just a question of, do I want to protect my car for an extra $1,000 or whatever the heck it was? And that's just a will I decision. It's not a which one decision.
And
And,
so
and
when
no,
you're,
I don't remember if I ever bought it or not.
so Mark, so when the distinguishing difference between both of them uh, translates into how people are presenting. And so, really, the impact of a will I versus which one, you're really talking about maybe presenting too early a price issue when it's not really a price issue. Does that sound correct?
Yes. So the way I would think about it is my buyers have to make a decision. Are they making the will I decision right now, or are they making the which one decision right now?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so, if I go shopping for cars and I'm not in the market for a new car and I'm just kind of meandering around, someone might be asking, "Hey, are you in the market for a new car?" And I go, "No, I'm just kind of looking." So they might be talking to me then about inherent value. What's the value of having a new car?
Mm-hmm.
So what do you do? Why would having a new car help you, make you look more successful, bring more business to you? But if I walked in the door and he says, "Hey, you looking for a new car?" And I go, "Yeah, I'm going to buy a new car." And they go, "Oh, what else are you looking at?" So now
Mm-hmm.
it's, why is my car better than those other ones that you're looking at? It's a
Mm-hmm.
very different conversation. My recommendation to salespeople is always assume that someone's trying to make the will I decision and talk about the inherent value of buying a product like this. And then once we know that they're going to look at a competitive alternative, then we can switch to talking about relative value. Why is our product better than other people's products?
And so that leads to this issue of what you're calling perceived differentiation. Talk about what that really is all about.
Well, so let's start with differentiation, and then we'll talk about perceived
Yeah, sure.
differentiation. Yeah, so differentiation is one product better than another product. And so you might say that the interest rate that I have to pay on a mortgage is differentiation, right? One of them has an eighth of a
Mm-hmm.
point more or less than another one does. So that's true differentiation. However, does the buyer know about it? Did the buyer actually pay attention to what those interest rates were? Or maybe there were other things that one of the mortgage brokers offered that the other one didn't. So maybe it was a better service. Maybe they're friends with my relatives.
Mm-hmm.
So there's lots of different things that could be important to a buyer. And what matters isn't what's true. What matters is what the buyer believes, always. And so we need to make sure that we're explaining all of our differentiation, at least the things that are in our favor. So all of our positive differentiation, make sure our buyers understand what that is and why it's so important for them. And so that's when I think of perceived differentiation. It's not good enough to just have a better product. I have to make sure my buyers know it and believe it and know why it's valuable to them.
Well, that leads to the issue of understanding the problem. And you've already talked about that a little bit before. And then you talk about it a little bit more in depth and the famous analogy of asking the five whys. Because I do think that it seems to me that that's where the salespersons kind of fumble around the problem understanding side of it. What are your thoughts on that?
I truly wish I had the easy answer to explaining how to come up with why, how to come up with the problem.
Yeah.
I often do the five whys because I
Mm-hmm.
want to demonstrate that there are different levels of problems.
Mm-hmm.
So an example I love to use is Ted Levitt famously said, "Nobody wants to buy a quarter-inch drill; they want to buy a quarter-inch hole."
Right.
Well, it turns out nobody wants to buy a quarter-inch hole. What they really want to buy is a picture hanging over the fireplace.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it turns out nobody really wants to buy a picture over the fireplace. What they really want to buy is a nice looking living room. And so now we could just keep going down until we get to some level. And what we're looking for in that level of problems for what people want is we want to find something that truly resonates with our buyers, is
Mm-hmm.
common enough that it resonates with a lot of buyers, and it's a problem that we solve. It's something that we can say, hey, we can help you solve that problem. And so
Hmm.
maybe a quarter-inch hole is the right answer to all of that.
Right. So talk about the issue, and you make a big point about there's three types of buyers and regarding their price sensitivity, and you go from the analytic to the relationship to the trust buyer and where all that plays. Talk about what that means to a salesperson.
Yes. And so I think of those not necessarily as different types of buyers, but different types of buyers' value journeys. So these are the journeys our buyers go on while they try to figure out, am I going to buy this product or not? Right? What's the value of this product? The analytical journey is the one that we probably think happens all the time. It doesn't happen all the time, but it's the one we think happens all the time.
Hmm.
An analytical journey is you have a problem, you realize you have a problem, and you said, yes, I need to spend money to go fix this problem. So you just said yes to the will I, and you didn't talk to a salesperson. So what do you do next? You go to the internet. You go online and you start to
Right.
research what are the different possible solutions to this problem. And so you've done a ton of research already. You've got two or three different possible vendors. And so now I've done a bunch of which one decision making without talking to a salesperson. Then finally, I go talk to a salesperson. So what does the salesperson see? The salesperson sees somebody who just got to us after doing a lot of research between our product and our competitors' products.
Hmm.
So this means a couple different things. First off, from a salesperson's perspective, we have to be ready to talk about relative value. So what's the value of our product relative to our competitors? But the other thing it says to us is our marketing department had better have done a very nice job at talking about what our value is so that we can get those types of buyers to come talk to us because they're doing a ton of work on their own on the internet. Then we have a relationship type buyer.
Hmm.
A relationship type buyer is someone who says, "Hey, I've got a problem. I think I'm going to go spend money to solve it." So they just said yes to the will I decision without salespeople helping them. The next thing they do is they go call a salesperson. So they don't bother looking it up online. They just say, hey, I trust this person, or my friend Bob recommended this person. So they just said, look, I'm going to go to this person. They ask a bunch of questions, they learn a lot. And when the salesperson's talking to them, they need to be talking about inherent value. So, what's the value of solving the problem? And as far as we're concerned, there is no competition, right? We're not even talking about
Right.
competition. We're
Hmm.
just talking about what's the value of solving the problem. And then the buyer says to us, thank you so much for your help. I really appreciate it. I need to go look at a couple other vendors. So now we suddenly switch and we make sure we point out how we're better than our competition, right? Where our key advantages are. So we're talking a little bit about relative value as they leave. Now, the great news is relationship buyers or buyers that are on the relationship journey, they tend to be less price sensitive. And because they came to us first, we got to set the table, we got to build a relationship. Odds are really good they're going to come back and buy from us. The last of the three journeys is called the trust journey. This is my favorite journey. This is the one that says, we realize, hey, I've got a problem. I need to spend some money to go solve it. And then we just go talk to a salesperson. Salesperson only talks about inherent value. What's the value of solving the problem? And then the buyer simply buys the product. They never look at a competitive alternative. In this case, that buyer was not price sensitive. In this case, if we gave a discount for whatever reason, we probably made a mistake. We probably
Hmm.
did not have to discount in order to win that piece of business. It may not be the most common, but it is definitely the most profitable, most lucrative type of buyer out there.
Hmm. So you talk also about having these value conversations, and you go into depth about how the salesperson needs to handle it. And it starts with collecting problems and results, prioritizing the results, and then talking about the value results. Could you explain a little bit more about that?
Sure, we go back to the issue that says salespeople, companies don't understand what problems are. But
Hmm.
once we've gotten over that hurdle and we've been able to create a relatively robust value table, we've listed a whole bunch of different possible values or possible problems that our buyers may be running into. Then when we're having a conversation with the buyer, what we want to do is understand, well, what are the problems that you're trying to solve? Why did you come talk to us? Right? Why are you talking to a mortgage broker and not Wells Fargo? So there's some things that are going on in the buyer's mind. I want to know what those are, what those problems are. And then once we get to what those problems are, we can then start asking them, I'll say they're leading questions, but they're really not.
Hmm.
The questions are simply something like, great, if we solve this problem, what's that going to do for you? And we're trying to get the buyer to articulate how much value there is to them. If I think of this in the world of B2B, and so if we're talking about a mortgage broker trying to build a relationship and sell to a real estate agent, then the question becomes, hey, if I can do this, what's that going to do for you? And odds are really good. They're going to talk in terms of, hey, I close deals faster, I win more clients, I get more clients. So those are the types of things that they're looking for. So we then ask the question, great. So if we could move this needle this way, how much is that actually worth to you? How much money will you make because we did this? That's where value really is in B2B, is how do I make my client more money?
Well, that's the age-old issue, that's for sure. So the age-old challenge for sure. And so talk about when you're conducting this, where people seem to stumble around, they don't go deep enough into the problems. Therefore, they can't give, maybe the person has listed several problems and what is the priority of the problem, and where the salesperson needs to not start selling too early, which is in essence what happens because they hear something that sounds like a problem. Hey, I got the answer for that. And in fact of the matter is there could be a different problem.
Yes. And what we wanted, oh my gosh. So true confession time. Really, really young in my career, I was a salesperson. And I was without a doubt one of the worst salespeople ever to walk the planet. But I was really good at spewing all the features of my product as I stared into my customer's eyes, just hoping to show a glint of interest in something.
Right.
Right. and and so I can imagine now, because I'm so much better, I would ask, hey, do you have this problem? They're like, yeah, I have this problem. And what do I want to do next? I want to pitch, oh, we solved that problem. Let me tell you how we solved that problem.
Right.
And that is just not the right approach. The right approach is to figure out, oh, you have this problem. Great. If we can solve that problem, what would that do for you? What's the value of that?
Hmm.
Now, do you have any other problems that we may be able to solve? And what we're doing is we're truly, this is not manipulation. This is, we are truly trying to understand the situation of our potential buyer. We want to understand their problems so that when we talk to them, when we eventually talk to them about our solutions, we're addressing their specific problems. We're helping them understand what's the value of doing business with us.
And so when you hear the problem that's being designated by the person that you're selling to, and I think salespeople automatically make the decision, well, here what that value should be. And I think you make the great point that what they might think as value is not really the value. You have to have the consumer or the realtor in our industry talk about what it means to them. It's really what you're saying.
Absolutely right. Value is different for individuals, for each
Right.
each different buyer, each different company. So what
Hmm.
matters to them is the way we want to be talking about our solution.
Hmm.
And we
And
don't know that if we're not asking them questions. They
right.
they have to be doing the talking, not us.
And that leads to the issue of putting together the best thing you can do is put together a question sequence that really is eliciting these types of answers. And so that's the hard part that salespeople definitely do have. You make also the point that as a salesperson, you don't have to tell them everything you know, which is what happens all the time. It's, I'm going to be smarter than you, so I'm going to tell you everything I know. Talk about that because I thought it was a really good point that you were making.
Yeah, I actually don't even remember what point I was making, but I can just say, yeah, that's a true statement. Um, we want to be smart. We want to say what we
Sure.
know and be the smartest person in the room. But in truth, what we're there for is to help someone solve a problem. And when we can get ourselves and our own ego out of the way, then we're much better positioned to help clients, help potential buyers. One of the things that I like to say when I think about this whole conversation, this whole value conversation, is a salesperson doesn't know what any given buyer cares about.
Right.
They don't know what that buyer values. So I know my product really well, but I don't know how much value you're going to get from my product. As a buyer, you on the other hand know your problems probably, but you certainly don't know my product and you don't know how much value you're going to get from my product. And it takes that conversation. It takes both of us working together with an attitude of, let's go discover if there's enough value here for us, for it to make sense for us to do business. I've said it several times, but we're not trying to manipulate someone. We're trying to jointly discover how much value is here in this transaction.
And you can't do that unless you ask questions. I mean, that's really what it does come down to. And when you start selling too early, that's the fatal component for sure. And that happens all the time. You talk about, and the last point that I really want to have you certainly expand upon is there's no such thing as a commodity. And I think that was an interesting, controversial statement from the standpoint that when you look at financial world, money is money, and in essence, one could say it's a commodity business, but we certainly have our salespeople, our differentiation is somewhat of the thought. But talk about that because I don't. I think it was a really interesting point that you were making.
Yeah. So anybody who thinks they're in a commodity shouldn't be selling a product, shouldn't be designing a
Yeah.
product, defining a
Hmm.
product, because I don't need a salesperson to sell a commodity.
Hmm.
What I need are salespeople that can communicate the value of my product. And the
Hmm.
value of my product comes from differentiation. So it
Hmm.
could be perceived differentiation, it could be real differentiation. But in the end, we have to figure out how are we going to differentiate our product. One of my favorite examples came a long, long time ago, but one of my pricing mentors, Reed Holden, he had this great example where there were companies that were selling aggregate, crushed rock, right?
Hmm.
And so how the heck do you differentiate crushed rock? And you've got to figure this out because is there a way that I could get someone to pay me more? And it turns out what they ended up doing was they ended up creating two different lines. One line was, hey, you can wait in line until it's your turn. The other line is, hey, you can jump the line and we'll get you to the front of the line quickly. And of course, you paid more if you went to the front of the line quickly. Now, I'm still selling crushed rock, but I'm selling it at a higher price to people who are impatient. And so, therefore, I was able to build differentiation. It, every business should be able to do something like this, right? Otherwise, there's no reason to have salespeople.
I would agree with that completely. I do have one more, I think, last question. You make and I thought this is really very interesting about good, better, and best. And if you could just talk about that, because I think it's really important. And you see it in these HGTV shows and all these shows where they're always showing three houses and all of that. Talk about that because I think it's really an important concept.
Yeah, I'm not sure how important, how relevant it is to your clients, but let me just talk about it for a second because it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And that is, as buyers, one of the things that we hate is we hate making a mistake. We would rather not make a decision than make a mistake.
Mhm.
And so it becomes pretty straightforward. If you give me a very long list of things to choose from, and I'm trying to design my own product or whatever it happens to be, it's easier for me not to decide. I just won't buy anything. So if you give me too much choice, I probably am going to just say, no, thanks. I can't figure this out. On the other hand, when we give someone a good, better, best choice, it makes it pretty easy for them to make a decision. In
Mhm.
fact, it makes it really easy for them to make a decision because if you remember, I said, we don't want to make a mistake. People tend not to buy the good because they think it might not be good enough.
Mhm.
People tend not to buy the best because they think they might be wasting money. And so people buy the one in the middle because it's safe. And so when we create good, better, best packaging, most people buy the one in the middle, and we do it because it's safe for people.
Well, I think that's really, I think, really a smart insight, because how you present financial options is still falls within that line of good, better, and best. You can present them different ways, which I think is really important for salespeople. So, Mark, share with us any last thoughts on the value. I mean, we covered a lot, but again, share any last thoughts that regarding this value and all these years you've spent analyzing it, what that all means.
Well, I would say I've probably said this a few times, but the hardest thing for people to do is articulate the problem that they solve. And I would learn how to do that. I would
Mm-hmm.
recommend everybody learns how to do that. Um, Once you learn that, it not only helps you sell, it helps in so many different decisions. So when you can truly understand the problem, you are now understanding your customer. You build better relationships with your customers. So I would absolutely focus on that if I could.
Well, I think they're words of wisdom to end by. I highly recommend Mark's book, Selling Value. I think it's the best, one of the best sales books that I've read in a very long time. And I'm thrilled to have you with us today to talk about it. And I would highly suggest that you go to Amazon and go get it right away. And certainly, Mark has podcast blogs. Sign up for them. They're terrific. Connect with them at LinkedIn. And Mark, do you want to share any contact information with our listeners today?
Sure. If anybody wants to reach out to me, they can reach me at mark@impactpricing.com.
Good. Rush to it, because this is such an important topic, and I'm so glad that you put this information out. So thanks again, Mark. I really appreciate you sharing your thoughts today.
Pat, thank you so much for having me. It was a great conversation.
Yeah.